So thanks for joining this morning. We are going to run through Emerald's P6-QA tool, and I will be the one presenting today. So I'm Nicole Jardin. I'm joining you from Calgary. I'm the founder and CEO of Emerald. I'm an engineer by background and started my career out in construction claims disputes for 5 years, and that's when I started Emerald because it's sort of frustrating to be working on a claim and dispute rather than having people run their projects more effectively. So that's really how Emerald came to be. Now, I've always used Primavera, so I learned P3. That's how long ago I started, and of course have been using P6 for many years. So some of the struggles, of course, that we have when we're running our projects are we have to have a team. Without a team, you're not going to get your project done. And in that situation, you may be receiving schedules from other people. You may also have many people within your own organization building schedules. So what, of course, that means is we have to make sure they're built well. And it's not always easy because you might be, not everyone has the same attitude towards a schedule. It's not just one way that you can put it together. So you have to be able to not only critique your own schedules within your group, but you have to critique schedules you receive. So let me ask a quick question just to start us off. Do you receive schedules from contractors? And if so, do you also have specific requirements? So that's another thing we're going to touch on. Okay. So if you go ahead and vote, I'll share this out. And we do share all the statistics from our webinars on our website. So it's quite interesting sometimes to see the information we gather over the year. So I'll go ahead and share that. So if you don't receive schedules, that's okay, because you can also use P6-QA to analyze your own quality of what you're building. Now, when we're building P6 schedules, we don't have to just use them for time. You can, of course, do resourcing and costing in there as well. So you should be looking at trying to use all aspects of the P6 project management tool that you've got. So we need to be able to look at all those and see whether or not, not only is the schedule doable, but also is it put together well, or are there gaps? And that's really why we built P6-QA, because we were being hired by clients to come in and critique their schedules, usually because there was a schedule gate that required them to do it, not necessarily because they understood the value of critiquing how the schedule was put together. Okay, so we decided, well, rather than have us hired just to fulfill a gate in their project management processes, let's actually give people a tool that lets them do it themselves on an ongoing basis, and then just call us in when there's something specific. That's really what we were trying to do. Now, let me ask another quick question. How do you currently check your schedule quality? Okay, so people might hire someone like us, so that's certainly something that we've done over the years. They might have another tool. They might pull it out into Excel and run all sorts of different graphics on it. There's lots of different ways people do it. And, certainly we're going to find some people don't have time and they don't necessarily do it. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to fill a gap in the space to give you better cross-project, multiple user type tools. Okay, so you're going to see P6-QA is embedded right inside of P6. And it's going to let you consistently look at your schedules and see where the gaps are, see where any perhaps things have been missed, and understand where any bottlenecks are. Okay, so we're going to look at schedule quality, but we also have what we call a BP, or business process quality checks too. I'm going to show you that. And the idea is to move away from having to have expensive third-party companies like us come in and do all your analysis. You should be able to do a good, huge chunk of it yourself, and then just call in someone for certain situations. Okay, that's what we're trying to help you, so that you spend less money You're doing better job in P6. That's really the benefit there. So I'm going to show you the software in action. So let me just give you an overview of how it works. So what you're going to see is we can check schedules. Of course, everyone uses P6 for the timing, which means you put in activities and you put in logic or sequencing or relationships. So you have to be able to check those. So we're going to show you how we check logic, how we check leads or lags that you put in. And a lead is just a negative lag. It's just a different terminology. And of course, durations. We want to understand how the activities have been built. Now, then on the schedule quality, we need to go look further. We want to look at whether or not the schedule is a real schedule or it's full of constraints. And there's different kinds of constraints. So you're going to see hard and soft constraints. And I'll show you what that is that we're looking for. And then, of course, we want to look at the other aspects. So the resources and the costs. And there's flags in there that you can set so that you're analyzing those, especially if you use them. It's a very valuable part of the picture in the project management space that goes beyond just the dates. And then, of course, we get into updating. So once you start updating, there's additional things that you want to be looking at. And I'll show you how we're analyzing those. So you may be aware of industry standards out there in the marketplace. There's lots of different standards. And then most of our clients have some of their own quality checks. So I'm going to show you how you don't only have to live with some industry standard. And we've have the out of the box, we've got quite a few of those already inside the system. Okay, so very, very robust tool that we've built. And you can deploy it in the way that makes sense for your business. So when it comes to business process quality checks, there's all sorts of different things that you might do. Okay, and every time we do the rollout for our QA, we usually have consulting time in it because you've got specifics that you want, so we can incorporate new quality checks. So we're usually checking, of course, the project activity resources, expenses. They may vary for the different kinds of projects that you do. So if you're doing a shutdown, turnaround, or outage, or you're scheduling down to the hour, so very, very heavy detail, the things you're going to check will be different than if you're doing a 10-year-long capital project or maybe a 2-month-long operational expense project. So I'm going to show you how we have the flexibility in what we've built to do different types of metrics. And of course, it will also depend on the kind of project that you're doing. So we'll show you how you can introduce your own specifics. If you're on an IT project versus a construction project, and if you're at the proposal stage versus you're approved and you're in execution, the things that you're going to check will vary as well. So I'll show you how flexible the tool is on the way that you set it up. So I'm going to jump into the software. So the way that it works, it's really kind of a three-part problem, or 3 steps to running QA. So you put in the validations, the things that you want to monitor. So we give them to you, but you don't necessarily have to use all of them. So we would turn on the ones that you want, and then turn off the ones you don't want. And if there are additional ones you want, we would help you put them in, and then you're off to the races. You can run the analysis, and that can be a regular analysis, or you can manually invoke it. And I'm going to show you that. And then, of course, we highlight where the deficiencies or perhaps things that you need to validate are. So then you can go through and fix the problems. And that's how simple it is. You can rerun it. You can then snapshot your outputs and report on them. Okay, so these 2 pieces, the snapshotting and reporting, would lend itself very well to looking at another one of our tools, our P6 Reporter tool. And I'm going to show you a little bit of how that tool looks on the outputs from QA today. And then you, of course, want to publish that information. So you might publish it into a formal report. You might publish it into dashboards. So we've got clients doing a bit of everything there with the data. And then, of course, you hope that the schedule will be improved. That's really the point. So you want to be looking at time over time. Are things getting better? Are we improving the schedule? Or do we still have gaps? Okay. So we work in a space where it's always evolving. We don't just have a schedule and then that's it. We never change it, right? We're adding activities, perhaps removing activities, changing durations, etc., rearranging orders. So we need to continue to monitor improvements and or perhaps things that get interjected into the schedule that might make it weaker. Okay, so you got to be looking at it on a regular basis. Okay, so let me jump into the software and let me do this. And how you actually run P6-QA. Okay, so I moved over to P6. I'm showing this to you in P6 Client. Everything that I'm doing, though, can pretty much be done in P6 Web as well. So if you use the web portal instead, everything I'm telling you can apply there as well. Because what we do is we rely heavily on P6 functionality with layouts. Okay, so let me explain to you what you're looking at. So I'm in the project window, and I see a lot of projects here, and my projects have been critiqued in most cases because you can see the outputs. So this top one I haven't run the QA on as of yet. So this is what it would look like when you have a new schedule. So I have a bunch of fields that I'm going to run validations, and I'm going to get an output to the validations. So you're seeing 3 different visuals. So a stop sign, yield sign, and a green check mark. Pretty intuitive. We're just using out-of-the-box components to P6 to let us know whether or not our schedule has any problems in these different areas. So am I missing logic? If so, is it a successor that's missing, or is it a predecessor that's missing? Do I have a lot of float in my schedule? Do I have a lot of activities that are long, so a high duration? So these are all the different aspects of what I am monitoring. And I'm going to see whether I've got things that are good or things that aren't quite so good, and whether I need to fix them. So let me go ahead and run it on this schedule, because this might be a new schedule that I haven't run the tool on. So first and foremost, you get to control which schedules are being monitored. So right now this one is set as no, don't run QA on it. If I do want to run it, I will say yes. Now then the next thing I can do here is say, how often do I want to run QA? Now you can see some choices here. So we're just using out of the box things here in P6. So we're running hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, or manual. Okay, so in this case, I run it manually. So when I tell it to run, that's when it's going to run. So the way that I tell it to run is just to clear the date, and its QA is going to pick that up and start trying to run QA on this schedule. Okay, so we should see some various flags here come in a minute. So how long it takes, it's going to depend on how big the schedule is. If you have a large schedule with thousands of activities, it'll definitely take longer than a small schedule. And then the other thing is, if you've already run it So in this case, I've run it already on these two. It will be a bit quicker because some of the flagging will already have taken place. Okay, so the time will depend definitely on the schedule. So it's going to do its thing, and we'll see some results in a minute, and they should pop up here. Now, not only do we have the flagging here, we also have an output down below. And we've broken those outputs into notebooks. And this also can be configured based on your particular requirements. So these are some examples, some of the more or less consistent examples. So let's start with the schedule quality checks, which are the DCMA checks. So we get our output here, and we can actually look at that notebook in a larger format. So you can just see it right inside here. So we're getting a red versus a green versus a yellow in some of the checks, depending on what we've told the computer is a pass, a good or a bad, pass or fail. So this gives you a bit more information about what we're actually monitoring. So when we're looking at logic, for example, so this first checkpoint, missing logic. So if an activity is missing a predecessor or a successor, it gets a fail. And we're looking at how many activities. So we've got the statistics here. So how many actually were missing logic, how many were remaining. Okay, so some of the metrics that you're looking at are for activities that are still coming up. So if an activity is already completed, for example, the logic ties to it are not so critical in that case. So that's why we've got those two pieces of data. And then the total number of activities that are hitting or being evaluated for this is what that is telling us. So then we get an idea of how well we're doing on certain things and where the gaps are. Okay. Now, in terms of a red versus green versus yellow, you can put in what the threshold is. Okay, so you might have a threshold that allows you to have some activities with the problem, and some you might have zero tolerance, zero threshold. So we have the ability to control that as well. So I'm going to go to that layout so you can see how you set up the thresholds. Okay, so I have the criteria. So this is where we set up the thresholds. So this one is what you would predefine before you run the analysis. And what we're saying here is we have some tolerances. So these are percentages. So 2%, as long as we have less than 2% with the problem, in this case, high duration, then it would not be a red stop sign. Okay. Now you may say I have no tolerance. That's fine. If you want to have a zero tolerance, you just put 0 in there. Okay, so this is configurable by you, not by us. So you can manage it yourself. Okay. What constitutes a high duration? In this case, it's in hours. So 960 hours is what we would call a high duration. Now, again, you can see here I've got different levels of what is constituting a high duration. Now that, of course, is needed because, as I mentioned earlier, if you're doing a turnaround project or you're working in hours, a high duration might be something that's over more than one shift or 2 shifts or 3 shifts, depending on how you've defined the criteria in your schedule. Okay, so that could be 10, 20, 30 hours. Anything above those is a high duration. Okay, so that's why you need that flexibility, and we've got it here in the tool. Okay, and then we've got a bunch of other things that we're monitoring. So high float. Now, if you have a high float activity, it could well mean that you forgot to tie it in to your logic. Okay, so that's why high float is one that you want to be monitoring. It could be a flag that you've missed logic. We mentioned missing logic earlier, so we have zero tolerance on missing logic, which is a good one to look at. Whether we've got leads, which is negative lags, or positive lags. Okay, so again, we're saying here with a 0 on these, we don't want negative lags. So we're watching for that specifically. So you have the control. That's what I'm trying to show you here. You have the control of how the tool is looking at the data and coming up with those flags. Okay, this looks like it's maybe not running. Let me just see if it's going to actually work. Yeah, looks like something may not be turned on right now in our demo environment. I apologize for that, but you get the idea. This is what it's going to fill in. It's going to give us the flags here. And that's what we would expect to see when we run it manually, is for these to be updated. Okay, now let me jump into the detail. Now I had run it on it previously. So if I stay with that same project and I open it up into the activity view, the tagging needs to be down at the detail. So we tag at the resource level, we tag at the activity level, we can tag steps and expenses. So we can monitor all the different layers inside of P6. And the output, of course, is I need to get into the detail. I need to get into the activities to do the inspection, if you will, and to make sure the schedule is put together well. So we rely on P6 and stuff that you guys already know how to do. Okay, so we rely on different layouts to show you where the problems are. So I've got a schedule quality layout that I'm using. I've got a layout for business process quality checks. I've got a layout for updating checks, DCMA specific. Okay, so just using what you already know how to do to make your life better, easier inside of P6. So we rely on P6 for showing you what QA has found. Okay, so let's look at how you analyze the output that you get. So this is looking at some of those metrics. So some of those schedule quality elements that we were just talking about. So do I have missing logic? Well, it looks like I do have some missing logic on some of these. Now, whoops, sorry, for some reason it's just kind of disappearing as I walk through. So we need to look at those. And I could have filters on these, right? I can have filters that just show me the ones with the logic missing. I can have them showing me specifics. So you can get as many layouts as you wish to make this better. Now I've got a small schedule, so I can handle many things in one layout. If you have a much larger schedule, a few more layouts with more filters would definitely benefit. So let's look at some of the things that it's showing us. So we're looking for red stop signs, right? And the thing that's handy, if you have a simple layout, you can just click at the top and it'll sort the different fields the way that you want. Okay, so you could have less grouping, and that would allow you to see very, very quickly the ones with problems. So let's look at some of the ones that we see in this example with problem. So we've got some with high float. So you could put the float field right next to your field in the layout, or you could come in to the status window and look at that. Okay, so we've got a high float. We've got 720 hours. That's what we're tagging as high. So these ones, we need to look at what's happening here, right? Do they have an open end? Well, it looks like they're okay. looks like they're okay. And it depends on what you're seeing. So this is showing that we've got some no successors. Well, there could certainly be no successors. Certainly, we will have some activities that have no successors, for example, or no predecessors, for example, because of course we've got um, activities that will be starting the project. There will be activities that are finishing the project. Okay, so we would definitely be able to look at those and decide whether we've got to clean up some logic here, yes or no. Now we're also looking at finish to start relationships. So do we have only finish to start? So that's an important quality metric when you're looking at logic. We want to try and have mostly only finish to starts. It makes updating easier. It makes tracing logic easier. So we're watching for that. So here's an example where it's saying, no, we don't have only finish to starts. And in this example, we've got a start to start. Okay. Now you might say, well, that's okay. This is a legitimate relationship type for this activity. So what we've allowed you to do is we use the blue star to allow you as the scheduler to say, I've looked at the check mark or the stop sign or the yield sign in this case, because it's letting you know that it's not all a problem, but there was one that was a problem. So we allow an override, and that's what the blue star allows you to do. So that changes our metric. So we know not to count this one in the future as a problem because you've already looked at it, okay? And then we don't override it. So you need to monitor those in case they've changed something, okay? But this gives you the ability to put an exception and allow the computer to keep going with its quality gate. So for example, on this one, we're seeing a problem with high duration. So these are long activities. Well, there are probably those level of effort activities. If you've ever used some of these where, they're just for cost control, cost bucketing, for timesheets, if you will. So again, it's reasonable that some of these will just be long and level of efforts make sense. They're not usually driving activities, if you will. They're usually buckets for reporting. So again, you can override it with these exceptions, these blue stars, okay? And that would be the case probably for all of these. So I could go ahead and just fill down on those. So I've told QA that I've looked at those and they're fine. Okay, now we can analyze resources, expenses, etc. So I'm going to actually go to another layout and look at that. And before I do that, let me go back to the projects just to give you the lay of the land on some other things that we can look at. So I looked at the schedule quality. Let's also look at the business process quality. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, that is just sort of our catch-all for other types of things that you might want to look at. Okay, so for example, we might want to look at naming conventions. So we have clients that have very specific rules for naming conventions. So activity ID naming convention, whether or not you've got duplicate names. So that can be really confusing when you're providing a schedule and you've got handover, or complete activities without a good naming convention. So you can look at things like naming conventions, or we've introduced looking at mandatory codes. So if you have certain codes that you've defined as mandatory, we can look at those, okay? It's just a naming convention that we've put in there to watch for codes that they have to use. Okay. Now, if you do portfolio reporting, or if you do reporting to the owner, maybe you're the engineering firm and you're reporting on, or project management firm and you're reporting to the owner, there may be certain reports that require certain codes. So you want to make sure you've got all those codes filled in. Otherwise, your reports will be incomplete. So this is where a mandatory code evaluation would be very helpful. And we don't have that out of the box in P6. Let's say you're using resources. So you might have the idea of resources and you want to use the primary resource for flags. We've got lots of clients who use the primary resource flag. Or if I'm using resources, I might want to make sure I'm using roles as well. Okay, again, depending on the way you use P6. And I might want to look at cost accounts as well. Okay, so those are letting me know that I've got some gaps for sure in this particular project within there. Okay. So you want to look at those. Maybe I'm missing expenses. If I'm using expenses, I might want to make sure I'm using an expense category, again, for reporting. Or if I'm using steps, or if I've got physical percent complete, I might mandate that I'm going to use steps for that. Okay, so these are just a bunch of other things that you might want to introduce into your schedule and monitor them. Okay. We have clients that monitor calendars. So they have special calendar reporting. Okay, so this is just food for thought on the kinds of things that we can introduce. So one of their rules was that all the calendars needed to have the same start and finish times. Okay, so we're monitoring the different calendars that they're using, and we're monitoring whether or not they meet the criteria. Okay, so this is saying that there's no mismatch. They're good. They're good. Now, in this case, we've got some that are being flagged that there's a problem. So what this is saying is not all of the calendars are starting and finishing at the same time on the different days of the week. So we flagged the problem, and then that helps the scheduler go and see exactly what's going on. Okay, so I can see right now this looks very strange, and I can dig in further. So again, that's food for thought. That was a requirement for one of our clients. So very easy to introduce something like this, which makes it very quick to spot the problems. Okay. Now, this is particularly important if you import schedules. So if you receive schedules from, let's say, the contractor, and you have to analyze them. And again, we've got some of our clients, they analyze 50 to 100 schedules in a given month. That's a lot of work. And QA makes that much, much quicker and much more reliable as well, more consistent across all the schedulers. Okay, so that gives you an idea of the schedule quality, the business process quality. Let's go ahead and look at updating quality. Okay, so we've got this project. It looks like we've put some statusing in it. That's why it's labeled first progress. And you can look at the updating quality. Now, again, you can have a layout that already gives it to you. So it just makes it so much easier to see not only your own schedule, but let's say you're the senior scheduler and you have 4 or 5 people who work with you and you're trying to help them do critiquing on their schedule. You can have a master layout like I've got here, and I can see right now that this particular schedule has a few red metrics. So I might need to go and work with that scheduler just to help them understand what this is telling them. Okay, so this can be a huge benefit if you're a lead scheduler and you've got team members to help and coach through. this gives you the ability to do that very quickly, okay? And then you can jump either on a meeting or a Zoom call, something like that, and run through the areas that are having some problems. So let me give you a few ideas here. So this is a schedule metric that you're monitoring. Remaining duration, is it bigger than the original duration? So that's a good warning. The activity is having trouble. So that's a really handy flag. And the original duration versus the budgeted duration. Okay, so again, the budget at completion duration. So not only is the remaining duration longer, but the total activity is going longer. Activities that look like they're going to finish late. Activities that look like they've got negative float now. Okay, so they might have been okay when you started the plan. One of the things you want to make sure is you don't have any negative float, because of course those activities are not scheduled to finish on time. So you want to be checking that at every single update. Is my resource going over the budget? Is my resource missing actuals? So I've got an activity started, but there's no actual resource used up, which implies they've missed it on the update. Okay, so these are super handy ones when you're doing updates. If you've got a lot of updating to do, it's easy to miss something. Okay, so this is a good metric for yourself. Do I have any actual dates that are after my data date? Okay, so that can happen. You know, I might be doing my updates for the end of the week. So maybe my data date is going to be for the end of the week up to Friday, and I might be forecasting something will finish on Saturday. So you might have some that are legit, that they are actually after. Normally I would put my data date to Saturday as well. But I might have just typed in the wrong date, right? If you're putting in the dates, you might have made a mistake. So this is a huge good one to take a look at. And then, of course, same thing I showed you earlier, I can open the project and I can look at the details, okay? So I'm gonna have an updating layout that I wanna see, and that will already have all the different flags in there. Okay, so I can go and see very quickly what's going on. So, so here I've got a remaining duration that's higher than the original. You can see that right here, and it's got a flag, so I can see right away something very strange here, and I need to understand why this activity is off the rails. Now, this particular activity also has a negative float, so it's trending late. Well, that's not all that shocking because of the duration change being so great. But I can also see that my resource is over budget. So it's flagging that I've got a resource problem here. And I can see that my actual units are over my budget. Okay, so I can see it very quickly. Now, some of you might be saying, well, I can find all that. Nicole, you're not showing me anything that I can't do in P6. I'm not saying that you can't find these, but to have them flagged very fast for you to see and report on, simply, no, you can't do that out of the box in P6, okay? It would be much more work. And so, you know, I think the value comes in the time savings that these tools offer you as a scheduling team. So another very handy one here is we've got an activity that has started. Okay, so you can see that it's started, but we don't have any resources shown as used up. So it's a critique there. You know, if we started this, how come we didn't assign any actual hours in the progressing? Okay, so again, maybe you could find these. That's not a very easy filter to get that. Okay, so again, we've tried to look at the things that our clients have told us take them time. give them some stress when they're doing updates, and we've tried to make QA make that process much easier. So then you can find these and you can fix them. Okay, you can say, oh yeah, I did forget to get the actual hours, so let me get that updated. And then you're improving the quality of your output. Now a few others, let's just touch on those. So this is saying that I've got some actual dates after my data date. Now, being that this is a demo database, this is a little strange, but yeah. So my data date right now is 15th of May, 2020. And of course you can see that I've got this one started. And yeah, here's my actual date right here, that it's 27th of May. So that's after the data date. So that's not good business process. And it could just be a typo, right? I may have picked the wrong date in the schedule. So maybe I meant to pick an earlier date, in which case I can fix it, rerun QA, and it'll uncheck that as a stop sign. So it's iterative. That's the key thing. Okay, so these flags will change once you make the fix. So that's hugely important, is for it to allow you to make fixes, continue to do your work as a scheduling team, and get the latest and greatest metric. Okay, so I showed you schedule quality, business process. I showed you updating, and you can have more, right? This is, again, just food for thought. We've got different ways that you can look at things. So that's the key. That's the key to understand. And as I said, we've developed some of these different industry standards, and usually our clients use those, plus they've got their own. So that's why we've got client-specific validations in their own sheet. Again, just to make the reporting very easy, very streamlined. So you don't have to live with what you're seeing. You can take that and adapt into your specific processes. Okay, and we can monitor and create new monitoring quite easily inside of here. Okay, now I wanted to show you a few more outputs that you can explore. And let me just, I think I closed the window I want to show you. So in terms of outputting it, now I'm showing you outputs that are inside of P6, which is very good for you if you've got a scheduling team using it. But what we find is we've got lots of different clients who want to include this data outside of their just their P6 team. So we've also produced dashboards using our P6 reporter technology, which allows you to snapshot the schedules. So you can take a snapshot of where you're at today, and then you can take a snapshot of where you are at next week and the week after, or monthly, whatever makes sense in your updating environment. And then you can see whether things are getting better in the schedule development or whether they're not going in a good direction. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to show you here. This is a portfolio of different projects. So each one of these is a project. And I've got the different updates there. So in this example, it's monthly. And what we're seeing is things are, in this case, getting worse. Okay, so I've got more float, high float, more negative float in this last update. Okay, so obviously I've got to fix something here. Something's going badly, going in the wrong direction. Or if we look at this particular schedule, same, we're going in a good direction. So the updates were getting better. So these are weekly updates in this example. And we made some improvements on our high float, our negative float, high durations. Okay, so we're doing better on these. So this is the kind of output that you can get if you're using our QA tool in conjunction with the reporter tool, P6 reporter tool that we've put together. And then we've shown you this in Power BI, but you can output that to other reporting engines that you may be using already within your company. So if you use business objects, or if you use Tableau, or there's so many reporting tools, Domo, Oracle Data Visualization, or Oracle BI Publisher, you can output the same sort of information to those tools. Okay. Now, the nice thing about these tools is they're very intuitive. So you can give the data that you've got in P6 out to more people now. Okay. And we've got the different standards out there in the industry. We've already got them in these dashboards. Okay, so this can be a fantastic way to help communicate where you're at with your quality of your schedule, especially to the non-P6 folks that you're trying to communicate with. So just a few other food for thought. So this is taking those notebooks that we showed you, and we're producing them out into Power BI. Again, so the team can see them. And I can filter which update I want to look at, right? And we can see the different outputs changing based on that. And I can filter on the projects as well. So very, very handy to get the data we've got built in P6 out over to different users. Now, the other benefit is you can do some side-by-side type of comparisons with the different update windows, and you can take advantage of the strong reporting features in these reporting tools. We can get into a deeper dive as well, right down into the activities. So you don't have to stay at the portfolio level. Our reporter engine snapshots right down to the details, expenses and steps, resources, activities, WBSs, and you can do a deeper dive inside of there. Okay. So more and more, you're going to see us producing more output from QA into these dashboards. And if that's something of interest, definitely join us for some of the next webinars as well. We'll have more and more. And if you're interested, as we build them, we'll keep you apprised of the things we're building. So we're going to have more time-based graphics and so on. I think there's one more I wanted to show you. So here's another output that we've done for a client. So it's taking those different logic metrics and giving a little bit more of a dashboard, plus the improvements that we're seeing over the months. Okay, so lots of different ways to get that data to be more usable, not only by your P6 folks, but also by your broader project management team. Okay, and then they might be able to help you work through some of those issues as well. Okay. So lots of different ways to output the data so it's usable and beneficial beyond just the scheduling folks. I think those were the main ones to show you. Yeah, so lots of different ways that you can output the data as well. Okay, good. So I think I've shown you quite a bit there. Let me just see if I missed any questions. Okay, so I think there's a question there. Can we have custom checks? Yes, the answer is definitely yes. So some of the ones that I showed you are custom, that we built them for specific clients. They weren't in the initial package that we had put together. So actually a few of the ones that I have on screen are some of those custom ones. So one of our clients is a large engineering firm in the US. They work very heavily in the transportation industry and work with many departments of transportations. And one of the checks they wanted was the actual duration check, the remaining duration checks. Those are examples of specific ones they wanted. They also wanted that calendared one that I showed you earlier. So yes, and that's why we usually have a consulting package that goes along with when we sell QA, is because every client may want something specific. So you want to allow a bit of money in the budget to help develop those. They don't usually take as long. They might take 2 to 4 hours. A little more complicated one may take up to 8 hours to build. So yes, we can introduce your specific ones for sure. Now, how can I get this tool? Well, I like that question, obviously. So let me touch on, I'm going to move out of the software if there's no more questions about the software. And I'll go back to the PowerPoint. And I'll talk about the tool, and pricing and things like that. So can you see my PowerPoint? Hopefully.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great, thanks, Shannon. Let me touch on how we sell this software. So I'll talk about some benefits real quick, and then I'll jump into some case studies, and I'll tell you about how you can get the tool. So we don't sell the tool on a user basis. We sell the tool on a points basis. So a point in our in QA is item that you're monitoring. Okay, so if you're monitoring a duration, that would be a point. If you're monitoring a float, that would be a point. And the points are the cross of those plus your number of activities. So we're trying to make it scalable. So larger organization, it's going to cost a bit more. A smaller organization, it'll cost less. So that's how we sell it. So we have different packages: standard, professional, and corporate. And a check costs you less than a cent. Canadian, US dollars, it's less than a cent, because I think it's like 10 cents for 100 or something like that. So I think it's relatively inexpensive, and it's a subscription based. Okay. So if you're interested in it, we need to understand more about your particular example to give you the right package. Now, you can run it having your own P6 license, so you don't need additional P6 licenses that way. Your P6 agreement does say, though, that if you're putting data out to other tools like Power BI, you might need a web service license for people to look at it. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. That has nothing to do with us. That has to do with your existing license agreement with Oracle. So some of the things, the feedback. The real thing here is, if you're not a scheduler, you may not know all the ins and outs of things to critique. So this gives you a good starting point of things to critique. If you're a new scheduler and you're not totally sure, this gives you that strong foundation to grow your skill set. And then within just about every organization, we have new schedulers, we have very experienced schedulers. We might have an engineer who's coming to help us do scheduling, and they don't know much about it. So it really helps raise the standards within your organization, and it helps take some of the pressure off your lead scheduler, because they don't have to do all the analysis, all the critiquing. So that was a real reason we built this. Okay, obviously within our client base, we deal with lots of lead schedulers, and that was their thing. They said, we don't have time, so what can we do? So this is really where the tool started. And in terms of the problems, so you can see the problems much quicker. And this speed is actually one of my clients that I worked with. So I was working on a very large, multi-faceted building project in New York, over 8,000 activities in the schedule. And I was working for the CFO, and he didn't have a dedicated scheduler on his team. They were a developer, so they really didn't have the typical project controls group that we might have within an oil and gas company. So he said, I just got this schedule. How can I figure out whether it's any good? And I said, look, let me run QA on it. And in less than 2 hours, I gave him a good feedback on it. Okay. Now, if you've ever worked with a large schedule, you know it's not easy to understand what's in it in 8 hours, let alone 2 hours. So this is where QA can really, really be beneficial is the ability to critique a schedule very quickly. And in that case, I could see the critical path was very choppy. I could see that there were so many constraints in it. So I gave him a report very quickly, and didn't cost him very much. In this case, I ran it for him. So we ran it as a service, software as a service. And it didn't cost him very much, less than a few $1,000s to critique this on a multi-million-dollar project. So his project was over $600 million. So a few $1,000s, not even, to run that was very worthwhile. So those are some examples, some feedback from our clients. And certainly if you have any other questions, throw them in the chat room. So the way that we deploy the tools, so you buy a subscription, and our minimum subscription, unless we do a service, as I mentioned in that example, is usually 2 years. And then, as I mentioned, we have the standard package, the corporate package, and the in between those two, we have the professional package. So it depends on your requirements. So if you are interested in understanding the pricing, definitely reach out, and I'll ask the question now. Let us know how you want us to reach out. So I'll go ahead and ask that question now. So if you fill this in and you do want us to follow up and phone you and whatnot, this will help us know if you want us to do any of that. Okay. Or you might have someone else could use the tool. So that can be handy. So if you fill that in, that helps us know how you want us to follow up. So hopefully in the last hour, you've seen something that could be interesting for your team. We've been in the business for 28 years now, and we've had programmers on the team from the beginning. That's really because coming from claims, as I mentioned, and working with data, that's what I did. I was critiquing schedules, looking at updates, doing so much data management. I realized automating things would make a lot of sense. So when I started Emerald, I had the good fortune to have a programmer on the team from the beginning. And that, in my case, happened to be my brother. So we are a family business, and it worked really well. We've been a family business since the beginning, and having programmers, we've grown our team, obviously, to many programmers, and we've built many tools. So check out some of our other webinars, because we've got a loader tool, which is our most popular tool. It lets you load data in and out from Excel. We've got the reporter tool, which is really growing in popularity because people want their data from P6 to be used by others. And doing all the reporting in P6 can be very difficult. And not only that, not everyone will have a P6 license. So the reporter tool lets you take the data out. We've already made it easier for you to use and get the data out of P6 and get it into other people's hands. So that tool's gaining in popularity because so much dashboarding is required now, which makes sense because all that good data we have in P6 needs to be used out in the space. We've got other tools as well. So get to our webinar page. If there's things that you feel you're struggling with in P6, more than likely one of our clients has as well. And we've hopefully got a tool that fills the gap there. Okay, we've got updating tools. So our CAPS tool, our TAPS tool, which is barcode scanning, updating. It's the absolute fastest thing. You can't get updating any quicker. There's no tool out there that will beat it. So take a look. There's, I'm sure, something in our toolkit that will make your life better and make not only your life better, but faster. Okay, less stress. Oh, looks like I've got Sue's email on here because she usually helps me with this webinar, but she's doing training today. So I'll put my email there as well. And let's make sure I got it right. And you can use my email as well if you've got any additional questions, you want some follow-up. And if you're in the Philippines or in the Asia Pacific area, Donna's email on there as well. So you can reach out that way. So you've got different points of contact. Perfect. So I can stay on for another minute if there's any questions. I'll stop the recording here.